Hazards exist in every workplace, but how do you know which ones have the most potential to harm workers? By identifying hazards at your workplace, you will be better prepared to control or eliminate them and prevent accidents, injuries, property damage, and downtime. A key step in any safety protocol is to conduct a thorough hazard assessment of all work environments and equipment. In a hazard assessment, it's important to be as thorough as possible because, after all, you can't protect your workers against hazards you are unaware of. Avoid blind spots in your workplace safety procedures by taking into consideration these 6 main categories of workplace hazards. The meaning of the word hazard can be confusing. Often dictionaries do not give specific definitions or combine it with the term risk. For example, one dictionary defines hazard as a danger or risk, which helps explain why many people use the term interchangeably. There are many definitions for hazard, but the most common definition when talking about workplace health and safety is a hazard is any source of potential damage, harm, or adverse health effects on something or someone. Harm is best defined as a physical injury or damage to health, while a hazard can be any potential source of harm to a worker. Basically, a hazard is the potential for harm or an adverse effect. For example, to people as health effects, to organizations as property or equipment loss, or to the environment. Sometimes the resulting harm is referred to as the hazard instead of the actual source of the hazard. For example, the disease tuberculosis might be called a hazard by some, but in general, the TB-causing bacteria would be considered the hazard or hazardous biological agent. A common way to classify hazards is by using the following categories. Biological hazards, which contain hazards such as bacteria, viruses, insects, plants, birds, animals, and humans. Physical hazards, which can include slippery floors, objects and walkways, unsafe or misused machinery, excessive noise, poor lighting, fire, and more. Ergonomic hazards such as repetitive movements, improper setup of workstations, poor design of equipment, workstation design, manual handling, and repetitive movements. Chemical hazards depend on the physical, chemical, and toxic properties of the chemical. Psychological hazards consist of shift work, workload, dealing with the public, harassment, discrimination, threat of danger, and violence. Safety hazards involve slip and trip hazards, inappropriate machine guarding, and equipment malfunctions or breakdowns. Now that we've briefly discussed each hazard, let's dive in with a little more detail. Number 1. Biological hazards. Biological waste from hospitals and research facilities may contain disease-causing organisms that could infect site personnel. Like chemical hazards, etiologic agents may be dispersed in the environment via water and wind. Other biological hazards that may be present at a hazardous waste site include poisonous plants, insects, animals, and indigenous pathogens. Protective clothing and respiratory equipment can help reduce the chances of exposure. Thorough washing of any exposed body parts and equipment will help protect against infection. Types of things you may be exposed to include blood and other body fluids, fungi and mold, bacteria and viruses, plants, insect bites, animal and bird droppings. Number 2. Physical hazards. Of all the hazards in your workplace, physical hazards might be the least obvious. Despite their name, physical hazards aren't always something that you can see or touch. Common physical hazards include radiation, including ionizing, EMFs, microwaves, and radio waves, high exposure to sunlight and ultraviolet rays, exposure to hot and cold temperature extremes, constant loud noises. Number 3. Ergonomic hazards. Ergonomic hazards occur when the type of work, body positions, and working conditions put strain on your body. They are the hardest to spot since you don't always immediately notice the strain on your body or the harm that these hazards pose. Short-term exposure may result in sore muscles the next day or in the days following exposure, but long-term exposure can result in serious long-term illnesses. Ergonomic hazards consist of improperly adjusted workstations and chairs, frequent lifting, poor posture, awkward movements, especially if they are repetitive, repeating the same movements over and over, having to use too much force, especially if you have to do it frequently, and vibration. Number 4, chemical hazards. Chemical hazards are present when a worker is exposed to any chemical preparation in the workplace in any form, solid, liquid, or gas. Some are safer than others, but to some workers who are more sensitive to chemicals, even common solutions can cause illness, skin irritation, or breathing problems. Be sure to beware of liquids like cleaning products, paints, acids, solvents, especially if the chemicals are in an unlabeled container. Vapors and fumes that come from welding or exposure to solvents. Gases like acetylene, propane, carbon monoxide, and helium. Flammable materials like gasoline, solvents, and explosive chemicals. And pesticides. Number 5, psychological hazards. Good work is good for people's mental health and well-being. It provides structure and purpose, a sense of identity, and opportunities to develop skills and increased feelings of self-worth. There are some circumstances, however, where work has undesirable impacts on health and well-being. Psychological hazards can include bullying in the workplace, fatigue, mental stress, overseas work, remote or isolated work, workplace changes, workplace violence, or customer aggression. Number 6, safety hazards. Safety hazards are the most common and will be present in most workplaces at one time or another. They include unsafe conditions that can cause injury, illness, or death. Safety hazards may consist of spills on the floor or tripping hazards such as blocked aisles or cords running across the floor. Working from heights, including ladders, scaffolds, roofs, or any raised work area. Unguarded machinery and moving machinery parts. Guards removed or moving parts that a worker can accidentally touch. Electrical hazards like frayed cords, missing ground pins, and improper wiring. Confined spaces. And machinery-related hazards such as lockout-tagout, boiler safety, and powered industrial trucks. Some safety hazards are a function of the work itself. For example, heavy equipment creates an additional hazard for workers in the vicinity of the operating equipment. Protective equipment can impair a worker's agility, hearing, and vision, which can result in an increased risk of an accident. Accidents involving physical hazards can directly injure workers and can create additional hazards. For example, increased chemical exposure due to damaged protective equipment, or danger of explosion caused by the mixing of chemicals. Site personnel should consistently look out for potential safety hazards and should immediately inform their supervisor of any new hazards so that mitigation actions can be taken. This wraps up our top 6 workplace hazards. Be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons and leave a comment below letting us know what the most common hazards at your workplace are. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.